All right. Shalom, shalom. I'd like to start off by saying, Barakatah Yahweh, Barakatah Yahweh Shai, Kol Haloim La Yahweh, Bahashem Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Bakakadash. Double honors to the elders and apostles of Great Millstone who rule well. Blessings and salutations to the hopeful elect that's scattered abroad, the Akim and the Aquat that's listening in. Yahweh Ratazah, Lord willing that the lesson is edifying. The brother Shabab on the one back at you with another lesson. And what I want to go into, right, inspiration comes from this video I ran into in my Instagram, right? And I'm going to play this video and then go into a little history and then go into a couple of, go into Second Ezra's 15th chapter, starting at 39, I believe it is. All right, so let me play this video real quick. All right, because what you see happening here in America is an Islamic takeover. All right, which, you know, when I seen this video, it made me think of Second Ezra 15th chapter. Right, and you know, through the spirit, I feel that this Islamic takeover is gonna come down to an inside job being done in America, right, pertaining to Second Ezra, that 15th chapter, right, and it's also something that's that was written in the Albert Pike letter to Massini, okay, which you're actually seeing that being played out right now, okay, with this Islamic takeover. All right, so let me just play this video real quick and then I'll get into it. All right. Right. So it says these are basically mayors and vice presidents, you know, House of Representatives, you know, these are all for the United States, okay? You know, mayor candidates, okay? And if you realize what's being put out there is a bunch of, you know, Islamic people, man, all right, that are into being Muslim, all right, which that's not the truth, okay, at the end of the day. They're pretty much, you know, it looks like they're trying to have a lot of people convert to being Muslim, okay? Major urban cities, you know, New York City, Detroit, Washington, D.C., you know, it says cities and prisons, you know, and it's a lot of conversion being brought upon this country, okay? And one of the main ones that caught my attention is this new guy that just became the, I believe he became the mayor. I'm gonna grab him right now. Let me see when he comes up. There he is. He's a New York City mayor candidate. Okay, Zoran Mamdini. Okay, this guy right here. All right, and you saw he. There's a couple of videos out there with him. You know, partying it up with Jake and all that. All right, so you know, me seeing these videos is what brought me to Second Ezra, the 15th chapter. All right. Now, before I go into this guy, Zoran, right, Mandini, okay, Mamdani, whatever you want to call him, right? Let me bring out these Albert Pike letters real quick, okay? Which I've had these for a while now, just in case I, you know, want to bring it out for edification. Give me 1 second. All right. And this is the Albert Pike letter to Massini. Okay. See it. There you go. Albert Pike letter to Massini. All right. And I'm going to read it. And we're in the third woe. Okay. Entering into that third woe, which is that third world war. All right. Now, I might as well just read this whole first page real quick. All right, which is 3 pages. All right, but the point is when it comes to the Third World War. All right, so it says Albert Pike letter to Massini says the Illuminati plan for 3 world wars, August 15, 1871. It says the following is a letter that speculation claimed that Albert Pike wrote to Giuseppe Mazzini in 1871 regarding a conspiracy involving 3 world wars that were planned in an attempt to take over the world. The Pike letter to Giuseppe Mazzini was on display in the British Museum Library in London until 1977. This letter has been claimed by many internet sites to reside in the British Library in London, which denies the letter exists. All right, this is why they took it out in 1977, man, because you know that truth was going to end up coming out, man, as the scriptures say that their own tongue shall fall upon them. All right, it says Giuseppe Mazzini was an Italian revolutionary leader of the mid 1800s, as well as the director of the Illuminati. Albert Pike, historical Masonic figure, was the 33-degree Freemason occultist, Grand Master, and creator of the southern jurisdiction of the Masonic Scottish Rite Order. Following are apparently extracts from the letter showing how 3 world wars have been planned for many generations. All right, and we already had 2 world wars. All right, the first and the second already passed. All right, which that was scriptural. All right, let's grab that. This is one second. This is Revelations. This is Revelations 9, and it goes down to 12. It says, "One woe is past, and behold, there come 2 woes more hereafter." All right, so we had the 1 world war that already had passed, all right, which was in 1914. Okay, which this Revelations 9 is speaking of the First World War. All right, when you're breaking it down. Okay, then when you go into Revelations 11, okay, Revelations 11 and 14, it says the second woe is past, and behold, the third woe cometh quickly. All right, so the scriptures speak about 3 world wars. All right, so it's no coincidence that these devils, all right, wrote a letter to each other. I mean, Albert Pike wrote a letter to Mazzini speaking on these 3 world wars. All right, so with that being said, let me finish this letter. All right, it says the First World War must be brought about in order to permit the Illuminati to overthrow the power of the Tsars in Russia and of making that country a fortress of atheistic communism. All right, atheistic communism. The divergence caused by the agents of the Illuminati between the British and the Germanic empires will be used to foment this war. At the end of the war, communism will be built and used in order to destroy the other governments and in order to weaken the religions. Okay, so this is why that First World War was brought out, all right, to destroy the Tsars in Russia, all right, because Russia had a very big army, right? It says the Second World War must be fomented by by taking advantage of the differences between the facets in the political Zionists. This war must be brought about so that the Nazism is destroyed and that the political Zionism be strong enough to institute a sovereign state of Israel in Palestine, all right, which eventually that came about, all right, in 1948, all right, they actually made that official, okay, with the Balfour Declaration, all right, so their job was to take out these Nazis basically in the Second World War, because also the Nazis had a very big army, okay, and this is why you had basically Adolf Hitler, was trying to basically kill off, a lot of these people, man, all right, because they knew, all right, he knew that those weren't the real Jews, man, and he's seen what they were trying to do by taking over the world, you see, and trying to take them out of the way, okay. So it says during the Second World War, international communism must become strong enough in order to balance Christendom, which would be then restrained and held in check until the time when we would need it for the final social cataclysm. All right, which that final social cataclysm is happening right now. Okay, we're in effect. It says the Third World War must be fomented by taking advantage of the differences caused by the agent of the Illuminati between the political Zionists and the leaders of the Islamic world. Okay, does it sound familiar? All right, you see that all these Islamic people are being brought into power here in the United States. All right, and this is the reason why, because it's all set up, all right, for this World War III. All right, they have a certain agenda behind it. Okay, so it says, Salakia, it says the war must be conducted in such a way that Islam, the Muslim Arabic world, and political Zionism, the state of Israel, mutually destroy each other. You see, and this is why you have all that war going on by the Levant. You see, they're pretty much trying to sit there and destroy each other. All right, which this was all orchestrated. All right, since 1871, man. All right, it says, meanwhile, the other nations, once more divided on this issue, will be constrained to fight to the point of complete physical, moral, spiritual, and economical exhaustion. All right, it says, we shall unleash the nihilists and the atheists. All right, which you have a lot of nihilists being brought up now in these times, man. That word nihilist is always being brought up, all right, and you have a lot of them that are in full effect. Okay, it says, and we shall provoke a formidable social cataclysm, which in all its horror will show clearly to the nations the effect of absolute atheism, origin of savagery, and of the most bloody turmoil. Then everywhere the citizens, obliged to defend themselves against the world minority of revolutionaries, will exterminate those destroyers of civilization, and the multitude disillusioned with Christianity, whose this deistic spirits will from the, I think they were trying to say will from that moment be without compass or direction, anxious for an ideal, but without knowing where to render its adoration, will receive the true light through the universal manifestation of the pure doctrine of Lucifer, brought finally out into the public view. All right. And you see that being brought out in front of your faces every single day, man. This Luciferian doctrine, satanic doctrine. All right. Which at one point they're going to actually try to do it through Project Bluebeam, you know, trying to grab all these different gods and merge them together, you know, to basically brainwash the people, you see, and try to bring them into one power, one God, one world government, which is what this NWO, okay? It says this manifestation will result from the general reactionary movement, which will follow the destruction of Christianity and atheism, both conquered and exterminated at the same time. So basically, it went back to what they said in the First World War, right? At the end of the war, communism will be built and used in order to destroy the other governments and in order to weaken the religions, all right? Which all these religions were, none of them was the truth, man. All right, religion goes back into religio, which means to what? To bind or oppress, man. So they were just oppressing you this whole time, you know, putting you in a trick bag with all these different religions, all right? Which ultimately it's Yahweh Bashim Yahushua destroying every single one of them, showing you that none of them had the truth, you see? So does that not sound familiar of what is going on today, right? So now you have all this war that's out there by the Levant, right? These fake Israelites, right? And they're out there battling against all these Muslim religions, right? And then you have basically Christianity and Catholicism, because that's pretty much what all these religions are about, man. They come back down to Christianity, Catholicism, Muslim, okay, which are those the main three, all right. And then you have all these little branch offs, you see, different, you know, religions, but they all come back to those religions, all right. So the ones that's being left the most here is in America is the Christianity, you see, and eventually Christianity is going to be taken away along with Muslims, okay, because it just said that, right? Their job is to it says Christianity and atheism both conquered and exterminated at the same time, okay? And this is why you see, you know, through the spirit, that's why when I kept seeing these videos coming up of all these Muslims, all right, taking over these different offices, all right, in the United States, all right, it had me thinking like, damn, they really trying to bring out what was written in Albert Pike's letter to Mazzini, man, you see? And that's why you see all these Muslims, you know, taking over here in America, right? And you see a lot of it being brought to New York City, which New York City's is what? The Mecca, okay? Well, mostly everything started. This is the main headquarters of Babylon the Great is New York, okay? So again, it's no coincidence that these things are happening, right? So now that you have heard, all right, one second, this Albert Pike letter, now let's bring up this guy, okay, which is going to prove more of my point, okay. Zoran Mamdani, right? It says I looked him up, and it says Zoran Mandami is of Indian descent, born in Uganda to parents of Indian origin. He is a Muslim and became a naturalized U.S. citizen in 2018. His mother is the celebrated filmmaker Mira Nair, and his father is Columbia University professor Mahmoud Mandani. Okay, which we ain't even gonna go into them. All right, but you see, it says that he is of Indian descent, which the Indians go back to being who? Elam. Okay, now follow me on this. All right, him going back to being Elam. All right, brings me to Second Ezra's. Let me grab it. Second Ezra's 15, and let's grab it from we're going to start from 28. Okay, now I was also messing with, before I start reading into that, right? I was also messing with Chat GBT, all right, earlier. Okay, let me grab those pictures. Give me 1 second. All right, now let me start reading Second Ezra's 15th chapter. And hey, again, Lord willing is edifying. All right, I ain't the greatest with history, but there's some brothers that are just, real good with the history. All right, but to the best of my ability and my knowledge, I'm gonna break it down. All right, through spirit. So this is I could break down this chapter. It's just I'm talking about just the history, regardless, you know. But this is Second Ezra 15 and 28. It says, "Behold, a horrible vision and an appearance thereof from the east." All right, which that's going into Yahushai. All right, in World War III, basically. Okay. Now it says, "Where the nations of the dragons of Arabia." All right. Matter of fact, let me read from my scriptures, and then I'll have my chat GBT pictures for when I have to go into that. All right. Set that up. All right. So it says, "Where the nations of the dragons of Arabia shall come out with many chariots, and the multitude of them shall be carried as the wind upon the earth, that all they which hear them may fear and tremble." Okay. So where the nations of the dragons of Arabia is talking about these Arabs, right? Now it says shall come out with many chariots, with mixed armies at the end of the day. All right. So you have to understand that these Persians, these Iranians, they all go back, which is going to go down more. It says also the Carmanians, rage and wrath, shall go forth as the wild boars of the wood, and with great power shall they come and join battle with them, and shall waste a portion of the land of the Assyrians. Okay. Now these Carmanians, right, go into your modern day Iranians. Okay. Your Persians, right, because the Iranians go back to actually being Persians. All right. Now the Persians go back to being basically Elam, which Elam goes back to these Indians. Okay. Now we just read, when I was reading the about, let me grab it. All right, about Zoran Mandini is of Indian descent. Okay. Now to prove that, right, you can go into, as a matter of fact, let me get that from the chat GBT that I had. All right. Hold on, I have a couple. There's different parts that I screenshotted. I'm just going to try to get more to the main parts, so I don't have to do so much reading. Okay. I was asking Chat GBT, obviously, like I said, these Iranians go back to being Persians. All right. When it was speaking of the dragons of Arabia, it's talking about Arabs, all right, and then all these different mixed armies around that area. Okay, so you also have, when I kept going into chat GBT, it kept saying it was trying to go around it. It didn't want to say it fully, but you got to play with the chat a little bit, you know, to try to get your answers. All right. So I kept trying to ask it if the Persians go back to being from India, okay, being Elam basically. All right. And it kept trying to say that it wasn't, but it was saying that it was more like their cousins, that their roots come back from that. All right. Which, let me just grab a couple parts that said it. All right. This is, let me see. I had asked it, does India descend from Iranians and Persians? It's an excellent and very thoughtful question. The relationship between India, Iran, and the Persians is a fascinating one that touches on both linguistic and genetic history. The short answer is India and Iran share deep ancient roots, but they are distinct peoples who branched from common ancestral Indo-Iranian group rather than one descended directly from the other. All right, let's unpack this clearly. Okay, because you had, when you read, let me grab that real quick. This is Esther. All right, 1:1. Okay, it says, now it came to pass in the days of Ahasuerus, right? Ahasuerus is basically, he goes back to being a Persian, all right, which he was Xerxes the first, basically. Xerxes the first, all right? And it says, which he reigned from India even onto Ethiopia over 107 and 20 provinces. Okay, so Ahasuerus, I always say that name. Let's just say Xerxes, right? Xerxes the first, all right. He reigned from India onto Ethiopia. Okay, that's already a clue, you see. And he was Persian, you see. So going back to the chat GBT, all right, it says, let me see what else I grabbed. There's a part where it says ancient civilizations. It says the peoples of India and Iran have interacted and enriched each other's languages, arts, and cultures over the millennia. Okay. It says Iranians generally have positive feelings about India, with Indian films and cultural being popular. The Parsi community, all right, Farsis community in India, who are of Persian origin, you see, are seen as a respected part of India's heritage by many in both countries. You see, that's a clue already. All right. It says India and Iran share a common linguistic and racial past, and their relationship is characterized by deep historical and cultural links. All right. Showing you that they go back to being Elam. Okay. Then I had another one that I had put. It says migration of Iranians to India during 16th and 18th century, which I ain't going to read too much of it, but let me see what I can grab out of it. All right. Iranian migration to the Indian subcontinent increased significantly after Muslim governments were established. Okay. Especially during the Delhi Sultanate. All right, 1206 to 1526, and more prominently from the second half of the 16th century under the Mughal Empire, okay, and the Deccan Sultanates. Iranian immigrants, including administrators, officials, scholars, poets, Sufis, craftsmen, are artists and traders, were attached by the Persian language and cultural influence at these royal courts, which welcomed them and granted important positions. All right. It says most Iranian immigrants came from elite backgrounds rather than nomadic or rural ones. They were generally divided into two groups: those forced to relocate due to the religious persecution, war, or oppression, who sought refuge in India permanently. Okay. Now, in that same, because that was in Wikipedia, I moved down where it said reasons of for immigration. All right. It says since Muslim governments were established in the Indian subcontinent, migration from the Iranian plateau appears to have increased significantly. By the 13th and 14th centuries, the court of the Delhi Sultanate, 1206 to 1526, hosted Iranian immigrants who already held important roles. Same thing that was just being said. However, a new stage of Iranian immigration began in the second half of the 16th century. Administrators, officials, basically, that's the same thing I was just reading. I don't even have to read that. Salakia, right? Now, it says, let me see here. Give me 1 second, Salakia. Okay, so it says Iranian immigrants were generally divided into two groups. The first group consisted of immigrants who had been forced to relocate due to the religious persecution, war, or oppression. For them, India served as a place to seek refuge, never returning to Iran. This was not unique to this period, as it could occur any place at any time in history. Amongst these immigrants were Zoroastrian Islam, Ismailis, and Sunnis. The royal courts in India were willing to accept anyone as long as they had skills in the particular sector, since they were considered talent to be of high importance. Religious differences were not taken too serious in India. Okay, it says, sister, I'll just keep reading it. It says the second group consisted of immigrants who voluntarily relocated after failing to thrive in their own country. They could stay in contact with their friends and family and even return to Iran. Occasionally, this group would relocate between Indian courts, whether they served the Safavid dynasty in Iran or a dynasty in India, was of a little importance to the Persian-seeking notables familiar with court life. A saying had been coined that for them, India was a source of fortune. All right. However, many Iranians were disappointed by the lack of success in India, with some returning home. All right. Biographers sometimes describe Iranian immigrant poets as falling to India. Okay. So let me see what else I have here. Give me 1 second. Persians originally. Give me 1 second, Salaki. Bear with me. Because I screenshotted a lot. I should have erased certain things. Now, this is another one that goes into Carmanians, right? This is in the Encyclopedia of Iranica, all right? To prove that that they go back into being Elam, all right? This is Carmania, right? It says Carmania, region east of Fars province, all right? Approximately equivalent to modern Kerman, the old Persian form, right? Rendered as Elamite, okay? It says is attested only once in inscriptions in DSF 35. The corresponding passage is missing in DSZ, whatever that means. All right, but the point is, all right, real quick, It says, where it is said that siso wood, or wood of the jag, I believe that says, of the jag tree, was brought from Ganhara and Carmania for Darius's palace at Susa in the Persepolis fortification tablets. Carmania is mentioned fairly frequently in connection with travelers between there and Susa. A certain Carcass, apparently a high official of Carmania, is also named. The old Persian ethnic name Carmanian is reflected in Elamite, you see, which offers twice unpublished tablets. You see, so it's showing you that it goes back to actual Elam, okay? And it makes sense why you see all these Elamites that are being brought into power, man, because they're going back to being those Carmanians. All right, and that's what basically had me thinking about Second Ezra, the 15th chapter. All right, now let me see if there was anything else. Pretty much hit the point on that. All right, let me just look at my okay, there we go. This is another one that says, I forgot how I got into it, but I kept asking certain questions, and I said, so the Persians are cousins of Elamites, correct? Just to throw it out there to see what it was saying. It said that's a really thoughtful way to put it, and cousins is actually a fair metaphor. Though not in a literal biological sense, let's clarify what that means. It says linguistics and ethnic origins. Elamites were indigenous to southwestern Iran. You see, it says possibly going back to the prehistoric times. Okay, the language Elamite was unique, not related to any known family. Okay, it says Persians, on the other hand, were Indo-Iranian people who migrated into Iran around 1000 BCE from Central Asia. Okay, let's see what else I had here. These are just little facts to prove that going into these Iranians going back to Persians, which we know that for a fact, but that the Persians will go back to being Elamites. Okay. Yeah, see, this is it says cultural and historical relationship. However, once the Persians settled in what used to be Elamite territory, they inherited and absorbed much of Elam's civilization. Elamite cities like Susa became Persian capitals, and the Elamite language was still used for administration under early Persian kings. The Persians respected Elam's religious and artistic traditions. So while the two groups had different roots, their histories intertwined deeply. All right, which that was contradicting itself, because when I first read it, it said that they have connected roots basically in the beginning when I was reading the chat GPT. Okay. As a matter of fact, look, it says in the biblical and historical context, the Bible lists Elam as one of the sons of Shem, all right, which was true, a Semitic lineage, while Persia ain't listed because it rose much later. You see, because the names changed within over time. Ancient peoples in the Near East often saw nations as extended families. So in that symbolic sense, you could say Persians became the cultural heirs or distant cousins of Elam. You see? Right? It says, in short, Persians and the Elamites weren't biological or linguistic cousins, but they were cultural cousins, living in the same land and shaping each other's legacies over time. Okay. Um, it says some Zoroastrians do go back to India, often through programs like Return to Roots, to connect with their heritage, or sometimes for long-term immigration, as seen in the small numbers of Iranian Zoroastrians who moved to India in the 19th century. The vast majority of the Zoroastrians in India are Parsis, descendants of Persian immigrants who fled to India 1,000 years ago to escape religious persecution. Okay, so there's no need for me to go on anymore about that. Okay, let me just make sure I got everything I wanted out of these. This is it says right here, because I had brought up, I put in the chat GPT Esther 1 and 1, right? So I had redid a whole new page, right? And then I put that first, and it brought up Esther 1 and 1. And it says this verse opens the book of Esther by setting the historical context, and it introduces King Ahasuerus, commonly identified with Xerxes the first, who ruled the Persian Empire from 486 to 465 BC, and describes vast extent of his empire from India to Ethiopia, covering 127 provinces, right? So then after that, I asked it, this is why Persians go back to being Elamites. You see, you got to play with it a little bit just to see what it says. And then it said, come on, hold on, I just lost it. It said, this was a very interesting observation, and you're actually touching on a real historical connection between the Persians and the Elamites. Here, how it fits together. Elam was an ancient kingdom located in what is now western Iran, which its capital at Susa, Shushan, the same city mentioned in the book of Esther 1 and 2. By the time Xerxes the first, Susa had by the time of Xerxes the first, Susa had become one of the main royal cities of the Persian Empire. The Persians and Indo-Iranian people rose to power in the region of Anshan, which was originally part of Elam. Over time, they absorbed much of Elam's territory, culture, and administration. Because of this, many scholars describe the Persian Empire as having Elamite roots. You see, it was contradicting itself before, but see, now it's telling you that they have Elamite roots, both culturally and geographically. The Elamite language was even used in the early Persian royal inscriptions and bureaucracy before Old Persian writing became dominant. All right, so I don't even got to bring it out no more. Okay, there's a part where it says, in short, yes, the Persians did inherit much from the Elamites, and in a sense, they can be seen as later successors and descendants of Elamite civilization, both in territory and early cultural influence. Okay, and that's the point. I ain't even gonna bring no more out, right? So, with that being said, going back into Second Ezra, the 15th chapter. All right, let's read that again in 29. It says, "With the nations of the dragons of Arabia," all right, going into these Arabs, "shall come out with many chariots," basically mixed armies, "and the multitude of them shall be carried as the wind upon earth, that all they which hear them may fear and tremble." Okay. Also, the Carmanians, raging in wrath, shall go forth as the wild boars. All right. Remember, the Carmanians are what? The modern day Iranians. Okay. Going back to being really Persians. Okay. And it says, they will, it says, "They shall go forth as wild boars of the wood, and with great power shall they come and join battle with them, and shall waste a portion of the land of the Assyrians. Okay, so it says, and then shall the dragons have the upper hand, remembering their nature. Okay, so that remembering into their nature goes into Ishmael, man. All right, which Ishmael, when you go into that word, all right, it goes into wild is he. Okay, let's grab that real quick in Genesis 16. All right, because that's what it meant, that he was going to go back into his nature. All right, in Genesis 16, it tells you, get straight to the point. You had the angel that was speaking to Hagar, right? This is Genesis 16 and 9. And it says, and the angel of the Lord Yahweh said unto her, return to thy mistress and submit thyself under her hands. And the angel of the Lord Yahweh said unto her, I will multiply thy seed exceedingly, that it shall not be numbered for multitude. And the angel of the Lord Yahweh said unto her, behold, thou art with child, and shalt bear a son, and shalt call his name Ishmael, because the Lord Yahweh has heard thy affliction. Okay, when you go into that word Ishmael, all right, in the linear, let's see if it even says it in the linear. If not, I'll just grab it. Oh, it goes into Yahweh will hear. Okay, but I believe in here it says differently. Let me grab it from the book. It's a lot here. It says, no, Ishmael is Yahweh shall hear. Okay, because the Lord has heard thy affliction, and he, oh, that's what it is. 12, it says, and he will be a wild man, his hand will be against every man, and every man's hand against him, and he shall dwell in the presence of all his brethren. You see, he's a wild man. Okay, wild to see, basically going to that nature. That's why you see these damn Ishmaelites, man. They be blowing themselves up, these Arabs and all that, man. They be blowing themselves up in these churches and things like that, because he's a wild guy. He's a wild boy. Okay. So it says, and he will be a wild man, and his hand will be against every man, and every man's hand against him, and he shall dwell in the presence of all his brethren. And she called the name of the Lord Yahweh that spake unto her, thou power seest me, thou Yahweh seest me, for she said, have I also here looked after him that seeth me. Wherefore the well was called Birla, how do you say this word? Birla Rayo, right? Behold, it is between Kadesh and Bered. And Hagar bare Abram a son, and Abram called his son's name, which Hagar bare, Ishmael. And Abram was 86 years, and when Hagar bare Ishmael to Abram. All right. So basically, Ishmael went into what? It went into Yahweh shall hear. All right. But his nature was to be what? He was going to be a wild man. Wild is he. All right. So going back to 30, it says, also the Carmanians, raging in wrath, shall go forth as the wild boars of the wood, and with great power shall they come and join battle with them, and shall waste a portion of the land of the Assyrians, right? And then shall the dragons have the upper hand, remembering their nature, okay, being those wild boys, right? And if And if they shall turn themselves, conspiring together in great power to persecute them, all right, meaning that all these other Arab nations, all right, we're going to come together and unite in power, basically. Okay, it says, then, this is the point that I really wanted, right? Coming up, it says, then these shall be troubled and keep silence through their power and shall flee, meaning that we're going to fall. And then it says, from the land of the Assyrians, which the land of Assyrians goes into America, it says, shall the enemy besiege them and consume some of them, and in their hosts shall be fear and dread and strife among their kings. You see, going into that inside job, because you see them besieging them right now. You see them besieging the land of the Assyrians right now. All of a sudden, you see all these Muslims, all these Iraqis, these Iranians, okay, these Arabs, okay, they're all coming to America, which a lot of them are what? Sleeper cells. You know, a lot of them going to do a lot of damage on the low because it's going to be through an inside job. And this is what had me meditating with all these damn Elamites being brought into power in the United States. All right, with this guy, whatever his name was, Mondini, okay? He might be the one, perhaps, as I said in the title, right? The inside job, perhaps. He might be the one that opens the gates for them to have an inside job done, okay? Where pretty much, all right, it says what? It says that they shall consume some of them. The enemy shall the enemy besiege, all right? And from the land of the Assyrians shall the enemy besiege them and consume some of them, okay? And in their hosts shall be, and in their hosts shall there be fear and dread and strife amongst their kings, okay? So it might be very well that might be the setup there for them to be able to do an inside job and destroy certain things here in America, man, in the land of the Assyrians, okay? Because eventually all these nations are going to come together and destroy America anyway, all right? But you're going to have something big happen that's going pretty much, which we're already in those beginning stages of World War III, okay? But something's going to happen to set it off into that World War III heavy, you see? And this might be that inside job with all these damn Elamites and all these Muslims coming over here, you know, because you have the Mandini, whatever his name is, I keep forgetting his name, all right? Soran, he's basically allowing more of those Elamites here, and more of these Persian modern day Iranians come into this country, man. And a lot of them are sleeper cells, okay? So it says, and it says, behold, clouds from the east and from the north onto the south, and they are very horrible to look upon, full of wrath and storm, okay? And these clouds, all right, are basically going into, you know, these different armies and going, and the way to prove that is if you go to Ezekiel, the 38th chapter, all right, when you go to verse 9, all right, it explains that. This is Ezekiel 38 and 9, and it says, and thou shalt ascend and come like a storm, thou shalt be like a cloud to cover the land, you see, thou and all thy bands and many people with thee, all right? And when you go into Ezekiel the 38th chapter, you know, Persia is mentioned, you know, these Iranians are mentioned in there because Russia's going to be a guard onto all these countries, man, at one point, which you see that. All right, let's read that real quick since we're here. It says, son of man, this is 38 and 2, son of man, set thy face against Gog and Magog, all right, which goes into what? It goes into these Russians, all right, the bear, all right, and it says, the chief prince of Meshach and Tubal, and prophesy against him, and say, thus saith the Lord Yahweh, behold, I am against thee, O God, and chief prince of Meshach and Tubal, and I will turn thee back and put hooks into thy jaws, all right, because they haven't been amped up since the time of the Soviet Union, you see, but then they were quiet for a very long time, Russia, all right, but now the Lord's going to stir their minds again. He's going to stir up the Medes, as the scriptures tell you. grab that real quick. All right, this is Isaiah 13. This is Isaiah 13 and where's it at? Passing right by. It's a lot. Give me 1 second. I will stir up the needs, KJV. Yeah, see, I must have passed right by it. Oh, there you go. It says, behold, I will stir up the Medes against them, which shall not regard silver, and as for gold, they shall not delight in it. Their bows shall dash the young men to pieces, and they shall have no pity on the fruit of the womb. Their eyes shall not spare children. Okay, so the Lord's going to stir their minds up. All right, and eventually they're going to get that evil thought. Okay, the Russians are going to get that evil thought to destroy America. All right, which it'll say that as I'm reading it, right? It says, and I will turn thee back and put hooks into thy jaws, and I will bring thee forth in all thine army, horses and horsemen, all of them clothed with all sorts of armor, even a great company with bucklers and shields, all of them handling swords, going into what? All these different types of weaponry, all right? And the swords, all right, are going into these missiles. See, then it says Persia, you see, Ethiopia and Libya, all right, going into the Africans, okay, Persia going into these Iranians, all right. It says all of them with helmet and shield, Gomer and all his bands in the house of Togarmah of the north quarters and all his bands and many people with thee. Be thou prepared and prepare for thyself, for thyself, thou and all thy company that are assembled unto thee, and be a guard unto them. You see, so eventually they're going to be a guard. All right, Russia's going to be a guard onto these other nations. You see, which basically goes into what? All right, let the weak say that I am strong. Okay, because they were all weak at one point, but now they're going to be strong because they're backed up by Russia, and at the same time they also have nuclear power just like anybody else. You see, so it says, after many days thou shalt be visited in the latter years, thou shalt come back in the land that is brought back from the sword and is gathered out of many people against the mountains of Israel, which have been always waste, but is brought forth out of the nations, and they shall dwell safely, all of them. All right, and eventually you're going to see them destroy Israel, because Israel is going to be destroyed also, man, through thermonuclear missiles. All right, because the ones that are there are not the actual people that are supposed to be there. All right, the ones that are there goes back to being Esau, man. All these Amalekites, man. You see, because they were set there through the Balfour Declaration. Okay, and as a matter of fact, let's grab this. This is Ezekiel 36 and 1. It says, also thou son of man, prophesy unto the mountains of Israel, and say, ye mountains of Israel, hear the word of the Lord Yahweh. Thus saith the Lord Yahweh, because the enemy has said against you, aha, even the ancient high places are ours in possession. Okay, because they're in our homeland at the end of the day, man. They're not supposed to be there, man. It says, therefore prophesy and say, thus saith the Lord Yahweh, because they have made you desolate and swallowed you up on every side. that you may be a possession unto the residue of the heathen, and ye are taken up in the lips of talkers, and are an infamy of the people. Therefore, ye mountains of Israel, hear the word of the Lord Yahweh. Thus saith the Lord Yahweh to the mountains, and to the hills, and to the rivers, and to the valleys, to the desolate wastes, and to the cities that are forsaken, which became a prey in derision to the residue of the heathen that are round about. It says, therefore, thus saith the Lord Yahweh, surely in the fire of my jealousy have I spoken against the residue of the heathen, and against all Idumea. See, going into these Edomites, which have appointed my land into their possession with joy, with the joy of all their heart, with despiteful minds, to cast it out for a prey. You see? And that was by the way of what? The Balfour Declaration. They were given that land. Okay. So back to 38 in Ezekiel. All right. Where was I? 8, it says, after many days thou shalt be visited in the latter years, thou shalt come into the land that is brought back from the sword, and is gathered out of many people, against the mountains of Israel, which have been always waste. All right. They were always going to be waste, man. All right. As a matter of fact, let me grab that, and this is Malachi, because it was just saying that there were desolate waste. Okay. This is Malachi 3, 1 and 3. It says, and I hated Esau, and laid his mountains and his heritage waste for the dragons of the wilderness. Whereas Edom saith, we are impoverished, but we will return and build the desolate places. Thus saith the Lord Yahweh of hosts, they shall build, but I will throw down, and they shall be called, and they shall call them the border of wickedness, and the people against whom the Lord Yahweh has indignation forever. Okay. So going back to 38 in Ezekiel to 9, thou shalt, Salakia, 8, it says, after many days thou shalt be visited in the latter years, thou shalt come into the land that is brought back from the sword, and is gathered out of many people, against the mountains of Israel, which have been always waste, but it is brought forth out of the nations, and they shall dwell safely, all of them. Thou shalt ascend and come like a storm, and thou shalt be like a cloud to cover the land. Thou shalt, and thou and all thy bands and many people with thee. Thus saith the Lord Yahweh, it shall also come to pass that at the same time shall things come into thy mind, and thou shalt think in evil thoughts, and thou shalt say, I will go up to the land of unwalled villages, which is what? America, meaning that they have no protection. All right, especially right now, they have no protection. Why? Because you have America that's dealing with all these other nations right now, and different types of wars right now, which you always see America putting in their nose where they don't need to be. You see, so it leaves this place, America, the unwalled villages, open for them to do an attack. That's why you're going to have that inside job being done. You see, that's why very, very well, you know, perhaps it might be that inside job that's being set up right now through these Elamites, man. All right. And these modern day Iranians, these Persians. Okay. Because they're weak right now. It says, and thou shalt say, I will go up to the land of the unwalled villages. I will go to them that are at rest, that dwell safely, all of them dwelling, okay, all of them dwelling without walls, and having neither bars nor gates, to take a spoil and to take a prey, to turn thine hand upon the desolate places that are now inhabited, and upon the people that are gathered out of the nations, which have gotten cattle and goods, and dwell in the midst of the land. You see, so eventually Putin gonna have that evil thought to go and attack America along with these other nations. But basically Russia's going to be the one to set it off, man. You see, to get all these other nations to go against it. All right. So going back to Second Ezra, the 15th chapter. All right, where we were reading 34, it says, "Behold, clouds from the east." All right, now you understand what those clouds were. All right, and from the north onto the south, and they are very horrible to look upon, full of wrath and storm. Okay, again, going into these different armies. All right, it says, "They shall smite one upon another, and they shall smite down a great multitude of stars upon the earth, even their own star, and the blood shall be from the sword onto the belly." Okay, and that's why when you go into Revelations, that 8th chapter, all right, it talks about the place being, you know, full of wormwood. All right, because the missiles, all right, it's gonna hit it and basically destroy the waters. Let me grab that real quick. This is Revelations 8 and 8, and I just kind of go straight to the point. 8 and 10. And it says, "And the third angel sounded, and there fell a great star from heaven," going into that missile, "burning as it were a lamp, and it fell upon the third part of the rivers, upon the fountains of waters. And the name of the star is called Wormwood. And the third part of the waters became wormwood, and many men died of the waters because they were made bitter." Okay. So going back to the 15th chapter, Second Ezra, right? And 35, "They shall smite one upon another, and they shall smite down a great multitude of stars upon the earth, even their own star, and blood shall be from the sword onto the belly, and dung of men onto the camel's hoof. And there shall be a great fearfulness and trembling upon the earth, and they that see the wrath shall be afraid, and trembling shall come upon them." And that's what it goes into, you know, men's hearts failing them from fear, you know, according to Luke, 21st chapter. All right. A lot of men's hearts are going to fail from fear, man, from the things that they see happening upon the earth. It says, "And then shall there come great storms." All right. Basically what? More armies. All right. Great storms and from the south and from the north and other part from the west, and strong. And that west is going from America. "And strong winds shall arise from the east." Okay, the east going into armies of the east, basically, and shall open it in the cloud which he raised up in wrath, and the stars stirred to cause fear toward the east and west wind shall be destroyed. The great and mighty clouds shall be lifted up full of wrath, and the star, that they may make all the earth afraid, and them that dwell therein, and they shall pour out over every high and eminent place a horrible star, fire and hell, and flying swords, and many waters, that all fields may be full, and all rivers with the abundance of great waters. All right, going again into these missiles. Okay, that's what them flying swords are about. All right, it says, "And they shall break down the cities and walls, mountains and hills, trees of wood, and the grass of meadows, and their corn. And they should go steadfastly onto Babylon," America, "and make her afraid." Yeah, and what it means is that they're gonna break. They're not gonna break their ranks. All right, pertaining to Joel, let's grab that real quick. Joel, the 2nd chapter. Lucky. This is Joel 2 and let's just take it from 2. It says, "A day of darkness and of gloominess, a day of clouds and of thick darkness, as the morning spreadeth upon the mountains, a great people and a strong, and there has not Salaka, spreading upon the mountains, a great people and a strong. There has not been over the like, neither shall be any more after it, even to the years of many generations. A fire devoureth before them, and behind them a flame burneth. The land is as the Garden of Eden before them, and behold, and behind them a desolate wilderness. Yea, and nothing shall escape them. The appearance of them is as the appearance of horses, and as horsemen, so shall they run. And that's going into what? The 200 million missiles. All right, what it said, what it tells you in Revelations, the 9th chapter. All right, let's grab that real quick. All right, because the horses represent power. All right, and the missiles, they're gonna come, it's gonna look like horsemen together, making the noises, you know, like a bunch of horses, okay, coming together. All right, this is 9 and 16. And the number of the army of the horsemen were 200,000. And I heard the number of them. Okay, and this is talking about the missiles that's going to hit America, 200 million missiles. All right, so going back to Joel, right, 4, it says the appearance of them is as the appearance of horses, and as horsemen so shall they run. Like the noise of chariots on the tops of mountains shall they leap, like the noise of a flame of fire that devoureth the stubble, as a strong people set in battle array. Before their face the people shall be much pained, and all faces shall gather blackness. They shall run like mighty men, they shall climb. This is the point I want. They shall run like mighty men, they shall climb the wall like men of war. They shall march every one on his ways, and they shall not break their ranks. Neither shall one thrust another. They shall walk every one in his path, and when they fall upon the sword, they shall not be wounded. All right, so that's basically telling you when these missiles are shot, it's nothing that's going to be able to stop them, man. You see, they're not going to hit each other. All right, they're not going to break their ranks. They're going to go exactly where they need to go. You know, where the Lord, basically the Spirit of the Lord is going to be in each and one of those missiles. Okay, so let's finish that up back in 2nd Ezra 15 and 41. It says, fire and hell and flying swords and many waters, that all fields may be full, and all rivers with the abundance of great waters. And they shall break down the cities and walls, mountains and hills, trees of wood, and the grass of the meadows, and their corn. And they shall go steadfastly onto Babylon and make her afraid. They shall come to her and besiege her. The star and all the wrath shall they pour out upon her. Then shall the dust and smoke go up onto the heaven, and all they that be about her shall bewail her. Yeah, it's going to cause that mushroom cloud. All right, it's going to be rolled together as a scroll, as it tells you in Isaiah the 34th chapter. You see, it says, and they that remain under her shall do service unto them that have put her in fear. Okay, and that's pretty much the point, because then it starts going into Asia. Okay, talking about Moab. All right, how they are like onto America. All right, but yeah, that's pretty much the point. Okay, America gonna end up being annihilated through them thermonuclear missiles. But the real point that I wanted of this whole lesson was more of that inside job that's going to be done. All right, and with all these, you know, Arab nations coming together. All right, you have basically Elon being put in these U.S. power seats. Okay, that might be very well perhaps that inside job that's going to be done here in America through them, man. You know, to kick this off and take it to the next level. You know, and very well so may it happen. You know, because we're praying to get up out of here already, man. This place is just it's complete hell being out here, man. All right, there is no more future for America. This is why it's being broken down. All right, little by little, every single day. And your king, all right, your cruel Lord is the one that's setting it off for everybody, man. Because look at all the things that he's putting into place, all these laws, these draconian laws, man. You see how he's trying to, you know, how he's always trying to force war upon these other countries. You see, and this is why the scriptures say that the beast shall hate the whore. You know, even America's allies are going to end up being tired of them and coming together to destroy them, along with the rest of, Russia being a guard onto these other nations, you know. So, hey, Lord willing that the lesson was edifying, it wasn't confusion. I was just trying to bring out, certain points so you can understand why Elam, is being put in these different power seats, here in America. Here it is that this devil's using all these Elamites and all these, modern day Iranians, and has a whole bunch of sleeper cells in here, man, for a reason. It's all of Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai. As the scriptures say, the Lord of hosts mustered the battle. He's putting them all in place where they need to be for that great day of destruction. So, Lord willing, you will edify. So, with that being said, Barakatah Yahweh, Barakatah Yahweh Shai, Kovalo and La Yahweh, Bahashem Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Barakatah. Double honors to the elders and apostles, great millstone who well. Blessings and salutations to the hopeful elect and scattered abroad. The Akim and the Akwat that was listening in. Yahweh Rakatah, Lord willing, that the lesson was edifying. So, the next one, Shalom. So, fighting the good fight of faith, enduring as good soldiers of Yahweh Shai. Shalom.